I think what we should do is maybe how do we make house hacking easier? I think I just created our new podcast.
House hack.
House hacking.
With Halperin.
Yes! That was my original name. All right, today I have none other than the Alex Morsch, real estate broker with Peak Realty, also a good friend of mine. Alex, my assumption today is that we are going to spend 45 minutes ripping on each other and people that we know in our business, and then our great production team here will cut 5 minutes of real estate advice out of it, and that's what will actually make it to the screen.
Works for me.
Yeah, all right. So the reason I wanted to bring you on today, you are one of the few people like myself who is in this, you're a kind of a jack of all trades, right? You're kind of a wild card. So Alex is a very successful residential real estate broker, as I mentioned when I introduced him, but you also have this sub-world of weird deal making and deal finding that you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how that all shakes out.
Glad to be here. So yeah, I've been in the business for 5 years now. Cut my teeth doing tons of leasing, was surrounded by a lot of multifamily owners, and kind of worked my way into brokerage, doing mostly multifamily deals, a little bit of residential, but always kind of keeping my network of, what I call like street brokers healthy, and mostly working with, repeat clients that are investors like yourself and people who are trying to do like value add apartment renovation stuff, and then also doing some investment and renovations myself.
It's really is there a name for what you do? It's kind of a niche in a way.
There's a couple mentors, like some older brokers who I'd say like kind of led the way. Rich Ansamo from At Properties is definitely one of my big mentors. Great guy. And he's kind of in that hybrid residential commercial. I call it like resi-mercial. Like
there we go.
A little bit of everything.
Did we just create a term?
A little resi-mercial.
Resi-mercial.
Because like you find like there's brokers who sell single families and condos, and then you have on one end, and then on the other end you have like the the Essex and Interas, Kaiser groups of the world, that they're very commercial, very like I'm selling an investment. Here it is, like, and there's not a lot in between.
Right. What I really like though, I feel like some of the folks out there and some of the people in our business think that it's almost like there's I don't want to use the term weakness, but there's a connotation with being able to have a hybrid in what we do, that is almost means that it detracts from one of the other pods. I have seen firsthand, you are able to take your experience in commercial, multifamily, deal finding, construction, renovation. It's nothing but a value add for your residential clients. And that's kind of, I've always leaned into that for myself. I'll run into friends or family who have known me my whole life, and they'll say, "Oh, Joey, how, what's up with your construction?" I'm like, well, I haven't been a general contractor in like 6 years. I'm a residential broker. Yes, I'm still built, and these things really feed and build off each other. It's not like as I grow my brokering business, it's doing nothing but strengthening my investment business. And it seems like you found kind of the same thing, where you don't necessarily have to choose one lane.
Yeah, I'm able to add a lot of value to clients on both sides of the spectrum, just with different levels of expertise. And then for me as well, it's like it's just what I like. Like I wouldn't enjoy only selling investment properties in like this like strict, rigid manner. Like
Yep.
I prefer being able to like deal with different types of clients and have my hands in a couple different worlds. Otherwise it gets kind of monotonous.
Is it true that this winter we'll be able to find you walking the streets of Lincoln Park, knocking on the doors of beautiful gray stone buildings, just trying to find out who owns them and if they're willing to sell them?
After I make my way through Wicker Park.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot your number one neighborhood.
Yeah.
What is with the infatuation with Wicker Park? You are like Wicker Park's number one fan.
I think Wicker Park offers, if you look like historically, like they were promoting Wicker Park as like Chicago's like premier suburb. And I feel like I get that feel where it's like we're just far enough away from the city where it feels like it's like own little world. Like once you go west of the highway, it just has its own kind of vibe over here. I like that. The architecture, the park.
I was waiting for it.
The restaurants, like I just don't think there's another neighborhood that, like, for someone like myself in your late 20s, like there's just nothing that compares.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the one piece. As I said, I give you a lot of shit for your world starts and stops in Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village, and sort of that. The simple thing to do when we talk about neighborhoods is to think about the retail, the main streets, where you go out at night, where you eat. But as you start walking the side streets, those buildings are insane. 120-year-old buildings that are.
And like, I call it like building stock. There's certain neighborhoods that are built differently and allow for different avenues. But like there's a good building stock and there's a lot of buildings that still have a lot of potential and need reinvestment.
For sure.
So that's also my strategy, because if I'm in Lincoln Park knocking on Greystones, whatever, it's so competitive and price points are so high there that it doesn't really make sense as a business to, like,
sure.
Most of the people who are buying those in Lincoln Park, unfortunately, are knocking them down and building new shiny condo buildings.
Yep. Gosh, I hate those people.
No, but I think there's just a reality to it. And like, Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village, Logan, there's just prices have escalated over the years, but there's still room for people to come in and, improve the real estate and, make a sound investment while also improving.
That's why I love Logan,
Yeah.
because we're still even one price point below Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village. I know it's getting closer.
I would argue, yeah. I mean, if you looked in the past, like during COVID, I felt like 2-bed, 2-bath, middle floor is $550. 2-bed, 2-bath, Logan Square, middle floor.
When
is
I
what?
say price point, I'm talking about our building stock.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
So I still think, and you could correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but I still think the distressed Greystone and Wicker Park is probably selling for more than the distressed Greystone, as long as we're not on Logan Boulevard.
Yeah, and it depends like how much selling pressure is there, right? A lot of people in Wicker Park have owned properties for a long time. There's little debt. It's like a family asset. There's very little selling pressure, so it's tough to like get a deal. Where in Logan Square, there's owners that maybe have a little bit more selling pressure, and also their building maybe 10 years ago was worth $400. Now it's worth $1 million.
Right.
So it's like all of a sudden those people are like, okay, I'll sell. And me and you have both had some of those circumstances
For
this
sure.
year where long-term ownership, buildings are falling apart, and their 20, 30-year investment, it finally, they got a 25x return.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the problem with you and I sitting in this room. We could probably spend literally 24 straight hours, like just in this incredible deep dive into what we do, because we have so many areas that cross over and it gets really in depth. I'm gonna pull us out a little bit. So let me ask you this question, based on the last thing you were talking about with some of these long-term building owners who have grown with the neighborhood, they've been there forever. This is a little bit of a sensitive question, but I think it's important. A lot of what we do is we bring offers to those folks, to the people who have been in the neighborhoods for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They grew up in the building, their grandparents own the building. I think we probably have a fair amount of people out there watching that maybe raise an eyebrow to that practice. It's kind of capitalism at its best. I see both sides of the coin. So have you ever thought through when your head hits the pillow, have you thought through sort of the moral dilemma, let's call it, for better or for worse, in buying somebody's building that has been in their family for that long and what it means?
For sure. I think,
I only ask because I know you have.
Yeah. I think it's about how you conduct yourself in these situations. No one's forcing them to sell their real estate, right?
Correct.
So obviously there has to be an element where they make a decision that this is a good time for them to make a jump. And then it's just about offering something that's makes sense for you, and then being able to kind of accommodate their needs. Ideally, I prefer if there's another broker involved, so that I don't feel like being deceptive.
But sometimes there's not.
Sometimes
that's a tough situation.
Sometimes there's not. And like, of course, like if the property is not marketed, like automatically it's not going to receive a market price, right? So the building's worth $650, but you know, we have a client who will pay $600 cash and will close inside of 20 days.
Yep.
So there's trade-offs, right? They're giving up a little bit, but I feel like at the end, like we're also making a fair compromise.
And I think what you said at your first sentence hits it on the head. It's how you conduct yourself, right? So there's no secret. If you or I find a property, we most likely want to either bring it to one of our clients or bring it to me, and we want it for less than market value. That's how you add value. However, you mentioned something. You mentioned trying to strengthen the other terms so it may end up being a better overall experience for the person selling. So like you said, nobody's forcing this individual or this family to sell. What you're doing is you're offering them an opportunity to move on from that investment. Now, I'll give an example of where you'd be conducting yourself poorly, right? So I've heard of people that will they'll make an offer and they'll do something that I term spiking a property, right? So they'll put it under contract, they'll create this relationship with a building owner or a seller, but really they're still working out, are we really ready to buy it? Maybe they'll lower the price later. They're sort of locking up that property. So like, to me, that would be crossing the line into like, now you're acting like a jackass and you're not acting ethically.
Yeah, exactly. I think like a lot of the circumstances that we've dealt with, like, you know, we're buying it for this price, but it's like, it's as is. Like, we're walking through it. Right. We're not doing any inspections, trying to like retrade on them. Like, because it can be a very like stressful situation for, you know, a building owner who's owned the building for 20, 30 years. It's like a lot of it's new. So I always try to like, whatever my terms are up front, like that's what it is.
Right.
Like,
and again, I think that's why we've connected, and that's why I think we both follow those same practices. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, of course we want property for as close to as cheap as we could get it, but the overall experience has to be done the right way.
It's a small market, especially like, you know, West Town, Wicker Park. Like, there's a handful of active players and your reputation precedes you. So if you're a buyer who's gonna go and tie stuff up, try to retrade it, whatever, like people hear about that. And as a broker, if I hear someone is like nasty to deal with,
1,000,000%.
I'm staying clear from them. Like
1,000,000%.
So I think in the end, like, I believe in good karma, and that I think really plays into.
And just to tie a bow on this, I mean, look, and again, I'm sort of leaning right now into that underworld I was talking about, where we kind of find deals and trade them. Not so much the residential, more traditional brokering, but when we come in at, let's use your example, a property's worth $650. When we come in at $6 cash, as is, 21-day closing, no games. And then we find out 2 weeks later, the seller calls you and says, hey, Alex, you're an a-hole. I just met this broker at XYZ brokerage and they said I could get $650. The first thing you and I are going to say is they're going to bring you a retail offer of $650. You're going to have an inspection, most likely. They're going to tie this property up for 2 or 3 weeks. There's at least 50% chance that it falls out of contract. Yep. So these are some of those trade-offs and I'm not saying that's every time. Sometimes there are situations where you do want to go to the market and just get as much money as you can, but that's kind of the trade-off.
Yeah, it's certainty, and like, and when I do, you know, find an opportunity, the first person I'm going to call is going to be the person who can execute and who can do it with like the most gracefulness and certainty. I'm not going to like, you don't have a lot of opportunities with these off-market deals. Like, you maybe have like 1 or 2 showings times that you can get through the building. So I'm not bringing someone who like maybe wants to buy something and maybe can do it. Right. Like, it's someone who needs to buy something. Like, it is their business, and then they have all the means and vendors and people to execute that.
Yep, and that actually makes me think of another topic we could dive into, which is, I'm sure a lot of the folks who are joining us today are newer, fresher investors, or just people who have regular great jobs and want to get into real estate investment. One thing I always stress in every single meeting, video training that I do, the only way to do is to do. So you just hit something on the head. you are picking, when you find an amazing deal, you're calling people that you know finish. Yeah. So I think that's a really important lesson for some of the folks out there. And that's not saying go commit to something that your gut is telling you not to do. At the end of the day, you got to look yourself in the mirror, and if it's not the right deal, it's not the right deal. But is there something to be said about those first couple deals? Maybe is not about making $50,000, $100,000, but it's about starting to build that network and that reputation that you talked about.
No, for sure. I think, the first deal that, I did myself, my building on Damon, where off-market transaction, distressed property, roofs caving in, long-term owner, completely off-market, no listing agreement or broker on either side. I walked through the property, loved it. Obviously, it's a full gut. Like, there's no questions.
Yep.
I don't think I paid like the cheapest price ever. I think I paid a decent price for it.
Yep.
But after I did that first deal, people then started bringing me other opportunities. So
Yep.
it's like, you need to start somewhere. I'm not saying like really stretch yourself thin on the first one, but I'm saying that like you're not going to get the home run deal. Like right now, you can get the home run deal because people...
If you're willing to ignore the fact that we're in a recession, interest rates are going up, taxes are going up.
Yeah.
You could convince yourself it's a home run deal.
No, for
which
sure.
I will. I have no other choice.
No, I mean, look, I think if you're flipping a property and you're renovating it to sell it,
of course,
it's a different circumstance, right? Like by the time you're done, you need to make sure that like it's going to sell for X, right? When you're buying like multifamily, like when I was finishing my first project, it was like in the heart of COVID, rents were down, a lot of fear. I took a little bit of a haircut on what I got for rent, but mortgage is paid, time goes by, a year later, bump the rents, 15, 20%.
Right.
Now it's great.
Right.
So
it wasn't instant gratification.
No, it's a long-term thing. If you're trying to like flip these multifamily properties, like I don't think that's the way to do it.
Something that just popped in my head, and this, so far we've talked about zero that we prepared for.
Correct.
So maybe we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Another broker in our office here recently came to me and said, hey, I have this client that I met a couple times. He's looking to invest. He sent me a spreadsheet with 25 addresses on it, and he wants to go physically see each one. What I'm trying to do is tie that situation back to kind of what we were just talking about. Where's that happy medium between, and this is meant for our first-time investors or newer investors out there, where's that happy medium between due diligence and underwriting and doing, right? So like, what would you say to that individual that wants to go physically see 25 properties? I'll give you my answer after you give yours.
Cool. I think it starts with like, okay, why are you investing? And what are you looking for? Because that will help dictate like which properties might meet that goal. If you're looking on a long-term timetable, then maybe you go for the property that's going to be in a better location that might maybe make less return on paper, but that you're in like just the prime spot, whereas you can go a little bit out of the hotter areas and make higher cash on cash return, but at the end of the day, you're not leveraging your investment as much.
So what I'm hearing, our audience will pick up half of that,
yeah,
which is fine.
Yeah.
But basically what you're saying is a lot of what this individual actually has to do could take place in this office or on a Zoom or on a phone call.
100%. You should be nailing it down to like 3 to 5 properties. And
that's not to say, like, look, if you want to get out there and check, like we each go to like 100 properties a month, but that's the final step. Yeah. So what I mean by that is, first, you're having the conversation that Alex just talked about, which is, what are you actually trying to accomplish with your investment? Don't just invest to invest. Are you investing for cash flow? Are you investing for equity? Are you doing one property so it leads to 2 more properties? Are you trying to make a living? Do you need that money for this year? There's all sorts of different things. And I'm not trying to doubt, like, those are tough. I don't know the answer sometimes to my own question. And then if you have a list of 20 properties, ask your real estate broker or whoever you're working with to underwrite those before you even go to them. And I'm not talking about like a full pro forma, but like ROI takes 30 minutes.
No,
you know?
I mean, a lot of the time we're just like on our phone.
Yeah.
Okay, what is it worth now? What is it worth when we've rehabbed it? You can figure it out pretty quickly. Is this even worth going to see? Because if it's listed for $1 million and you're saying, oh, I think I can make it work at 800, there's no reason to go see it.
Skip it.
Skip it.
Yeah, so going to the actual property a lot of times in the development world, in the investment world, is more about verification.
Yeah.
That is your stamp of approval or checking to make sure there's... I'm usually going just to get a sense of like, is there going to be a tenant that's hard to get out of here, right? Like, you've been with me on walkthroughs. I spend 2.5 minutes in an apartment, like, at most.
Once you've been through so many apartments, like, for me, it's a gut feel thing. I just kind of feel everything out.
Size, potential, there's this formula going on in your head, right?
And then if it's like, if there's some like funky elements to it where you're like, the work is questionable,
yeah,
then you're like, okay, this is probably a full gut, if we're being realistic.
Right.
And if your residential broker that you're working with has never invested in a property before, they're probably not the best fit for you to take their expertise. Because
I think I told you this story once. Yeah. There's the building over on Sacramento. I was there walking it. This is a 4-unit brick building. I was there walking at the same time another young gentleman came to look at it. So another potential buyer. I'm a potential buyer. I'm not a broker in this situation. And we go into the first unit, and this guy goes and flushes the toilet. Like, he's checking the plumbing. And like, the first thing I thought in my head is like, fucking noob. Like, I'm sorry. Like, not to be an ass, but like, it did not matter. Like, what was the result going to be? What if it didn't flush? What if it did flush? Like, and there was no one there. To your point, there was no one there with him to be like, hey man, you're focusing on the wrong things, or like checking the water pressure. That makes sense if you're going to an armchair investment, right? So I think we're kind of talking more value add. Like, if you're going to a 4 cap in Lincoln Park, you know, your margins are so thin that you can't take on a huge expense. Check the toilets. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
never check the toilets. Never check
the toilets, yeah, it doesn't matter. I check under the kitchen sink to make sure there's copper.
Fair.
If you want to turn the sink on just to like see what the water pressure is, see if they did new water service. You know, a lot of these old buildings, when you add washer dryer, add dishwasher, they didn't add new water service, and the shower is just kind of like trickling on you.
Yeah. Let's get into renovation. So I'm doing a renovation. What's the one thing to not cheap out on? What is the one thing to cheap out on, if any?
I think the one thing not to cheap out on, especially on your first renovation, is the people that you're working with. Your contractor, your architect, any of your vendors. I would not cheap out on them, because you get what you pay for, and you want to pay a little bit more for someone who has expertise and who's going to be giving you like a little bit of higher level of service, especially when you just don't know which way is up.
Okay, so let's put that into let's play this out in reality though, because easy for us to say. So let's say you're first time really getting deep into a construction project. Let's say you don't have Alex or Joey next to you helping introducing you to people. So you're probably going out and you're getting 3 quotes or whatever. So you're meeting one guy who offers this, one guy who offers this, and one guy who offers this. This is a tough question, but like, how do I take that information and make how do you decide who to go with? Construction seems to be a huge pain point for everyone I talk to.
I would say try to get references for people who've worked with either of these people before, and then try to tour any of their finished product or any of their projects that they're working on.
Yeah.
Just to get an overall feel of okay, this is the quality. I want to see on a work site, how clean is it? How many people are actually working there? It's usually not the cheapest, is definitely not the best. So you just need to verify in some way, okay, is this person going to get it done in the timetable that we have with the budget that we have?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I have made this mistake, and now I'm seeing some of my friends and colleagues. If you think you're cracking the code, you're not, right? So if you think you've discovered the next great general contractor, and I'm just gonna give an example, some young, talented, whatever, and they're giving you a price that just does not match up with the other 2 you're getting, but you're I think I I think I can pull this off. I've discovered something. You're literally not. Trust me, I've tried it like 20 times.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Well, it's so appetizing, right? Because like you're like, oh wow, I'm saving $80,000.
Yeah.
With this guy.
Yeah. Nobody else knows this guy.
He's gonna get it done.
Yeah.
And
He's hungry.
Not
literally. He's hungry for business.
Yeah. I just made this mistake not using my my normal electrician. His bid was $10,000 higher. The electrician that my contractor was going to use, and I was like, oh, I can't. That's a lot of money. I got to make that decision. When rubber meets the road, and I need a new electric service, the electrician's like, oh, I can't get that part for 6 months. What do you mean? So I had to go pay $15,000 to get the electric service from my other electrician.
Yep.
Ended up costing me more than than what I thought I was going to pay.
Great example. And it also doesn't, I'm not necessarily sitting here preaching go with the most established high price company either. I don't think that's always, there's a project that's meant for them as well.
Yeah.
I think if we had to put a seal on this conversation, it's probably don't do it on your own. Use people, and again, shameless plug for myself and Alex, but it doesn't have to be us. Put a team around you that's taken some of the lumps. Like I'm pretty sure you've taken a lump or two recently. We've beautiful lumps.
Yeah.
I have some beautiful lumps out there too. Amazing buildings that have set records, but doesn't mean it was a seamless, profitable process for myself.
No.
I got distracted. Point being, bring your network along. Let them help you vet these construction people. Because that's a really, really tough thing to do. The construction in Chicago is kind of the wild, wild west. There's
a lot of people who are good salesmen, and if you have never done this before, you just can't. You won't be able to vet it out properly. You need a consultant who has done it many times over, and has worked with the same vendors over and over again.
Yeah, and I'll say also, I think everyone out there knows what a contingency budget is. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that before. It's essentially what percent do you think is a good percentage of total construction costs that you want to set aside in case you go over is essentially what a contingency budget is?
I like 20%.
That's high.
It's high.
And it's appropriate.
Because if if you're showing your bank, all right, my budget's 400 with a 20% contingency, you've got some room there because there's a lot of variables that pop up like, oh, my sewer's collapsed.
Yeah.
That's $20,000.
Right.
That.
Yep.
You need to bake out your full budget conservatively and then add that 20% on the end. It seems like it's not necessary.
Yeah.
But it is.
Right.
Yeah.
The next construction project that comes in under budget will be the first construction project that comes in under budget. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, I don't only think you need a construction financial contingency budget, you need an emotional energy contingency budget. And what I mean by that, especially for some of the newer investors or people that are going to get their feet wet in a construction project, even the best contract, if you knock it out of the park and hire the best contractors, electricians, plumbers, it's still not a seamless process, not even close. Construction and this game we're playing here, it's a shit show. At base, it's a shit show. I think it's important to go into a project with, I see so many people come in like really tightly wound is what I'm getting at. Like, I can't mess up. I can't mess this up. I can't go over budget. I'm gonna be such a meanie head to all these contractors. You have to allow for a little bit of flexibility in like managing your project. I think that's equally as important, and I want your take on that because you kind of just went through it. True or false?
Yeah, I mean,
and I think you did a good job of it. By the way, you weren't. Yes, you got frustrated at times, but you also kind of allowed for some of those waves to take place.
Timing is a huge component to construction, right? Like, especially in Chicago, right? Like, you're after September, like the rental rates that you're going to get are a lot lower than if you hit it during the heart of the season. So if you're like, I need to finish by September, and it ends up being, October, November, and you're still not finished, that can cause a lot of stress.
Yep.
Yeah, you need to be able to roll with the punches, and it's a contingency thing. If you think you're going to finish in 10, plan on 16.
Yep.
Like that's just how it is.
Yep. I guess when I'm thinking of situations, not necessarily with you, but people have called me like, I'm going to fire this person. Great. That sounds really fun, and you're powerful, and this person this contractor messed with you and they went over budget. Take a breather, write down what that's actually like, make decisions analytically, right? So something you just hit on, like seasonality. Okay, so you're going to fire the first contractor that upsets you. You're going to then spend time finding another one. You're going to lose a month or two. That pushes you past September. Now your rents go down $300 a month. So I think you need to allow yourself like a little bit of room with the people that you're working with.
Yeah, you're not doing this by yourself. Like, you're relying on other people.
Yep.
And, you know, unfortunately, like, people, like, stuff comes up, right? Like, you can't be mad at a contractor for not waiting for your doors to come in because you ordered them too late, and, you know, he had to go start another project and now he's got to come back and hang them. Like, it doesn't happen on the day that you want it to.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to the burning topic. So I talk a lot of shit about house hacking here, full admittance. I know we're not that different in age, but I like to joke like we are. And I feel like your generation is like the house hacking. Is that like the dream? Is there something going around, bigger pockets, or you and all your friends all want a house hack as if it's easy? So explain to me, if I'm a buyer, first time home buyer, I'm looking at condos for the most part. Most of you folks probably are. Pitch me on buying on home hacking, house hacking, and buying a multi-unit building where I could occupy one of the units. Because I know you want to pitch me on that.
Okay. I mean, it totally depends on, you know, like I said, what your goals are. For me, it's like, I don't see buying a condo as an investment. Like, if you look historically.
Don't show any of this. No, I'm just kidding, editors.
No, it serves a purpose. Like, I just don't think that it's like the most sound investment, because, you know, you buy a brand new construction for $550, right?
Yep.
2-bed, 2-bath, heart of Ukrainian Village, West Town, $550. You buy it, you pay your, 2% transfer taxes, this fee, title fees. 3 years later, you're like, okay, I'm ready for something a little bit bigger. I want to sell it. Broker comes to you, $570. That's what it's worth. Okay, $570 minus the 5% commission, minus the 2% transfer tax, minus this fee, minus that fee. You're walking out with like $530, about $535.
Yeah.
So it's not bad. You paid, $15,000, $20,000 to live there for 2 or 3 years, but it's not an investment because, well, one, you're not really returning much, and then two, there's no really long-term legs on it. Where
quick interjection,
yeah.
And then I'll let you get right back to it. I think it's important to note, I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I think if we're looking at a chart or 3 different swim lanes, let's call it, the condo's the middle, and you're about to compare it to house hacking. It's important to also compare that 3 to 5 year condo experience with renting. So yes, I hear what you're saying. You're kind of making the case why a condo isn't a great investment, but when compared to that 3 to 5 year period of renting, and you guys I've said a million times, there is a time and place for renting. It might look a little more appealing. Just want to get that out there.
Yeah, 100%. It also depends on your lifestyle too. Like, some people, like, given their circumstance, they don't need their house to be their investment. They have other things going on that will be a more sound investment. But
sure.
For me, it's like, I don't want to buy anything that I'm going to have to sell when I want to move out of it. And then I also don't want to be responsible for covering the whole monthly mortgage, taxes, and everything like that. So if you're buying a 3-flat, living in one of the units, a lot of people think, oh, like, I don't want to live in an apartment building. With some sweat equity and some work into it, you can turn your 3-flat into your condo that you also live in, but don't have to pay the full monthly payment for and taxes. And then 2-3 years go by and you want to move out. Okay, you're renting your unit for that much more than what you were actually paying.
You have a retirement piece.
Yeah, it's a sound investment, but
there's so many buts.
It's not like no work. Literally just got a text message from ABT, hey, we're here to fix your fridge. And I'm texting my tenants like, hey, fridge guy's outside. People are always like, oh, passive income. It's like, it's not really passive, it's work. So
well, I want to tell you, a video came out on Instagram this past week of Ben Lawless and I talking, and I'm going to stand behind this, where we said 5% of this population, however we want to define it, people that would be watching this, or people that we interact with, could handle house hacking the way it's usually brought to us. So, like, let me ask you this question. I probably run into 15 to 20 potential house hacking clients, searchers per year. It might end up being more than that, but let's just use 15 to 20. I'm sure you do too. How many actually make it to the finish line? And then maybe we could dive into a little bit like, how can we help the other percent get to the finish line? Because it appears to be really, really difficult.
It's not easy, and I think people's expectations have to be set. So I now live in my second property that I've house hacked, and there's a lot that comes with it. And if you have a 9-to-5 job and not a lot of time to like deal with stuff during the day, I could see why it's not very appetizing. But you just have to be like realistic up front. It's like, what happens if my toilet stops working? What happens if this stops working? And for people who are not in the business, they don't have the same connections that we do. Like it can be a lot.
Let's talk about this though. So you used 550, 600K as like, I understand there's below that, there's people above that. Let's just use that as like a typical-ish client we might talk to. It might be a tick high, but let's just use that. If that individual wants to buy a multifamily, let's call it a 3-unit for now. Couple things. First of all, their down payment, actually, let me start where I want to start. Let's not get into the financing piece. 650 condo is stunning. It's borderline brand new, maybe brand new.
Yeah.
All the appliances are brand new. Your significant other is extremely happy with your purchase. It's comfortable.
Yep.
Nothing's breaking, and you've made this really prestigious move in your life. 650 3-flat in the same neighborhood. So that person calls you, Alex, or calls me and says, I want a house hack. I watched the podcast. You guys are right. Let's invest. Forget about it. Where you're actually living is a 653 unit is extremely distressed. Those 15 to 20 people, almost none of them are coming to me saying, hey, let's find a $1.2 million 3-unit. I'll rent first floor for $4,000, second floor for $4,500, and then I'll live for free on the third floor, because the budgets don't match up. So what do you say to the 500, 600K condo buyer? How do they possibly get around that? Or like, could that be the real issue here?
It's definitely an issue. I would say, depending on, how much you have for the down payment, I would say, one, a lot of these residential loans, you only have to put 5 to 10% down regardless.
Even on the 3-unit?
Yeah, even on a 3-unit. And then my other point would be, why don't you partner up with, a family member, another friend, bring other investors into the 3-flat. You still live there. You can still pay, a below market rent, but they can help you with the, the down payment. And
gets a little more complicated, more difficult.
But you get what you put into it. So it's like, if you want to do no work and live stress-free, then buy the condo. If you're like, all right, I'll put in some work, I'm looking at this on like a long-term basis, and I don't want to pay the whole mortgage and I don't want to pay the taxes, then be the live-in owner. A lot of people have an issue with like being the live-in landlord and like having your tenants live below you.
I don't think most of I don't want to make this like an age thing, but am I allowed to do that? I think a lot of the people we interact with, that's not their issue. That's my issue.
Yeah.
But what I tend to find, again, is, tell me if I'm wrong, but we get so many people that are looking for the bottom of the barrel. I'm just quite frankly, like multi-unit buildings, super distressed. The price point isn't accurate. So I'm going to tell you a piece of advice, and then we'll wrap this up. I'll tell you a piece of advice I gave out in the past week, and tell me if you give me your honest feedback. Because sometimes I try things, and then I got to make sure I'm actually comfortable with it. But so I was looking with a colleague of mine and 2 of his clients. They were looking at that, going to say it, bottom of the barrel, like 2-flats. I think they were 400, 450 in like West Town, like really nice neighborhoods. And everyone I walked into, I'm like, tear down. Like, you don't want this. You don't want this. So my advice to them, because I love that people want to do this. It's a badass idea, and if you could pull it off, it's great. So I'm definitely not trying to tell you not to. I said, let's do this. What's the top of your budget? Let's just say they said 500K. I'm like, let's look 500 to 600. So let's look above your budget instead of below your budget. Let's see if we could find you a 2-flat or a 3-flat where some of the heavy lifting's already been done. And this seller is marketing to more of the traditional investor, and it doesn't quite fit that pot, right? Like, it's not quite cash flowing to the point where it's sexy enough for someone just to buy it as an investment piece. But the walls are already drywalled. We'll just skip ahead. That means some work has been done behind the walls over the last 100 years. And the exterior maintenance has been really good, and all you have to do is come in and maybe put stainless steel appliances in, quartz countertops, stain the floors, paint the place, and do a bathroom. Maybe call it $50K and work instead of literally knocking the place down. So I'm saying, hey, let's target this 500 to 600. Let's see if we could drag that listing a little closer to your price, and you're gonna save yourself so many headaches. What's the point in buying a $400,000 multi and then you're gonna dump 2 years of your life and $250,000 into it? Just stretch your budget up a little bit and you'll actually be saving yourself a shitload of money.
100%. I think that's the right way to do it. You don't want to like probably the 400, 450. It's like a frame house. It's like a little bit leany, and maybe it's the right location, but it's a sunk cost if you're putting money into something like that. Whereas like you get a brick building, a gray stone, something that's sturdy and upright, like that makes a little bit more sense to put money in. At least, my personal strategy has been to find the best buildings in the best locations that need everything, because that's a way where I can make sure that I'm not paying too much for something and I can do everything I want to it.
We're psychos.
Yeah, it's not, I don't like...
We have nothing better to do with our time, Alex.
I don't recommend it for the faint of heart. But if you're like, hey, I'm trying to settle down for like 3 to 5 years, I have like a considerable down payment, but I also want it to be investment, hit me up. We'll find you a 3-unit, absolute, just full gut rehab, and then you can design it however you want. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But there's that tough in between. Like if you don't like the layout, but it already has central air, you're paying for someone else's work that you don't like. You might not be able to move. You might not be able to make a master suite. You might not be able to do the open living because you have the load-bearing wall and you've got plumbing.
But again, you're talking psycho talk. This is for me and you. We're the ones who won't be able to live with it. I'm talking about our 90% of our people. I'm saying just buy something that's livable, and not stretching to livable. Like it's really livable. Like you could sleep there at night.
And you like the floor plan, because if you have to change the floor plan,
who's gonna like a 1920, 1890 floor plan where you have 7.5 feet from the exterior wall to your bearing wall? No one's gonna like the floor plan, which is why none of you actually buy house. How many people have you actually helped house hack? It's
like
hard.
1.5. Yeah, like realistically.
I think we need. This is really interesting. And next time you come back, I think what we should do is maybe how do we make house hacking easier? I think I just created our new podcast. House hacking
with Halperin.
Yes! That was my original name. But no, this is the truth. It's such a popular product, and it wastes so much of our time looking for, and we very rarely get to the finish line. All right, let's wrap this up. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Yeah. This was great. Give me in 1 minute or less, and by the way, if this is wrong, we end up burning this tape, and we take it down from all social media avenues. What are your market predictions for 2023?
I feel like the people who were buyers during COVID have either one, found something, or two, been like exhausted out of the market. They just watched the rates double. And so we're kind of like waiting for this next crop of buyers.
Yep.
And so like in my mind, the new crop of buyers is not coming out at current pricing with current interest rates. So people are going to be waiting for pricing to feel more attractive so that they can justify the current interest rate. So I think it's going to be a slow velocity. I don't think prices are going to dive. I think there's going to people will be trimming off their list price more. And I just think the velocity will be slow in Q1 into Q2. And then by then we should be at a point where people are like, all right, what's going on? Hopefully Q3 we see it go some way, because right now there's a disconnect between sellers and buyers.
Yep.
And we need that to go in one direction or another. We can't just have it like sit in this no man's land.
That might have been the most level-headed response to a market. That's not how you get clicks, man. You got to yell something about something.
Okay, sky is falling. Don't buy unless it's with me,
or me,
or him,
or someone on one of our teams. Did we cover everyone?
No, don't overstretch. And that's why I think buying a 3-flat is the best way to do it, because it's not a liability, it's an asset. So
don't you want my market prediction?
What's your market prediction?
Selfish. I mostly agree with you.
Yeah.
I think what happened was we had such a bottleneck. I'm going to mess up the exact, I don't want to just say during COVID, but like basically during COVID.
Yeah.
That insane explosion that happened early 2021 and then again early like spring 2022. It was almost like seasonality was on steroids.
Yep.
And I think, I agree with you, we are in a bit of a no man's land right now, but I think we'll just fall back to regular seasonality to some degree. So I still think come post Super Bowl, I still think we're going to see a seasonal spike. It might not feel like the fireworks show that we had the last few years, but for those of you who could recall back to some normal years like 18, 17, 16, I think it's going to feel a little bit more like that. I still think, here's what I'm interested in seeing. You talk about pricing having to level off or come down. I just still don't see the supply coming. Just in talking to fellow builders, developers, I think even your retail sellers now, your traditional sellers now are going to be potentially sitting out. I guess that kind of goes to what you were saying. It might be a slower buildup, but I don't necessarily see price dips. You might have hit it on the head. Leveling off might be the right term, but I think the low supply is going to keep things relatively stabilized.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for coming.
Thanks for having me.
This was great. So you guys obviously know where to find us on Instagram. You could follow me at Joey Halperin Real Estate. You could follow my man Alex Morsch over here at
Actually Good Real Estate.
Actually Good Real Estate. All right. If any of you guys need a real estate broker, it goes me, my team, then Alex and his team. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thanks.